we do it for the money. Every day me grind for it. Every day we do it. Do it for the money. Made it for the slums for real. Thank God for the blessings. Do it for the money. Every day we grind for it. Every day we do it. Do it for the money. Made it for the slums for real. Thank God for the blessings. Thank God for the blessings.
You're listening to the sound.
Holy God.
Mainland FM 98.3.
Good morning and welcome to Trends in the Papers on 98.3 Mainland FM, the sound of Lagos. Well, it's Wednesday, 2nd of August, 2022. Before we move on, happy birthday to our very own Auntie Lady Jade. Today's our birthday. I don't know why you didn't want to mention that. But then, happy birthday to Jadisola from all of us. We wish you amazing things. All right, now we're going to be looking through the major trending stories on the front pages of our dailies, and we have our papers here with us. And as we move on, what's going on out there today is the planned protest of the labor unions, and colleagues have been calling in and giving us some information. We'll see how things will turn out at the end of it all. But my name is Mobola Sandra. I won't be doing this alone. Fuhad Saheed will be joining in via the phone line to give analysis to the stories that we're going to be looking through this morning. We'll do this up until 8:30, and then by 8:40 we move on to Mainland Focus, where we'll pick one or two major trending stories, flesh things out, and then get your thoughts and contribution as regards the focal points for this morning. I have my papers here with me, the Punch, the Guardian, the Nation, Nigerian Tribune, in no particular order. But before we move on, good morning, Fuhad.
Yeah, good morning, Sandra. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you very much. What's the road looking like?
Free as usual.
So the protest
apart from the issue of the nothing for now. You know, everywhere looks cool, and it's a wet Sunday. Sorry, it's a wet Wednesday in Lagos. Sorry. So everywhere is still cool, calm, nothing yet. But of course, we are following the story. We are looking at how things will pan out as the day, goes by.
All right, thank you very much. Well, then let's just quickly move on then to the trending stories this week. We're waiting for any breaking news as regards the nationwide protest, as Nigeria Labour Congress insists that the action must take place. So we'll see how things would work out for the labor union. So I'll start with the Guardian newspaper, the major headline on the front page of the Guardian: rising hardship, NLC defies truce, proceeds on nationwide protest. All right, and that story is on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. That is the hot topic for today, whether or not they're going to march out. But there are strong indications that they are actually going to march out. But we have riders here. Rumor of reconsidering protest, handwork of fifth columnist, says Labour. Bajabi Amila: we are hopeful Labour won't protest. Ajaero lists demands before protests can be suspended. No room for violent protests, IGP warns NLC and TUC. Police disperse demonstrators in Kano warm-up protest. Northern civil society organizations pull out or strike. Another coalition warns against repeat of #EndSARS. Lukman accuses NLC of playing politics with fuel subsidy. And oil production under threat as workers protest unpaid salaries and allowances. So, despite all the government has done to try to, put some hinges in the plans of NLC, including court injunctions, long-drawn negotiation meetings, NLC will today proceed with its planned protest against recent fuel price hike, tuition fee hike in public schools, and withheld salaries of lecturers and workers in universities. So, Fuhad, we're moving ahead. We're moving on. Is there anything to take away from this persistence from the NLC and TUC?
As at yesterday evening, late night, we were trying to monitor the meeting of the government with the representatives of NLC and TUC. And of course, the last statement they issued was that they had not cancelled their planned protest. And of course, the government had reached out to them and appealed to them to cancel the protest for today. But they were still going to be meeting late into the night to decide whether the protest would go on or not. So if we're going to be going by the last statement issued by the Labour Congress and the TUC, it means that the protest will still hold today. But again, we've not seen any other statement. So one would assume that, well, protests will still go ahead as scheduled today across different parts of the country, majorly organized by the Nigerian Labour Congress. So that's the situation for now, and we'll wait to see how that goes. But on the part of government, Sandra, I saw the IGP. We saw the statement from the IGP warning anybody to desist from any form of violent protest. We just got a story now that even in Kano, some protesters who were warming up were dispersed by the police and all of that. You see, Sandra, this is the reality of governance. Whether the Labour Congress is able to hold its protest today or not, the reality is that the government has to pay attention. People are being pushed to the wall. There's a lot of suffering out there. There's a lot of agitation out there. Nigerians are angry and hungry at the same time. And it's important that the government pays serious attention to the silent yearnings of the people. If they make it public as a form of protest, it's even better. The unsaid things that the people bulge in is the most dangerous. And those are the things that can boomerang suddenly. I'm sure a lot of them knew how the Arab Spring started. The protest that engulfed the entire Arab world. It was just a singular act of somebody burning himself as a result of excruciating pain and poverty in the land. I think it was even related to the price of bread, something as common as bread, that led to several governments in the Arab world falling all at the same time. So my appeal again is for the government to listen to the silent and open yearning of the people, especially when it comes to good governance. Nigerians are going through a whole lot at this time. It is understandable that the government is calling for more time. I think it's even better now that we have a president that is willing and ready to talk to Nigerians. But beyond all of the rhetorics, beyond all of the headliners, beyond all of the beautiful plans that they keep churning out and beautiful statements, it is important that they walk the talk and put practicable things on ground to alleviate the sufferings of the people. But again, we are watching to see what will happen with the protest of the Nigerian Labour Congress and the TUC.
Thank you very much, Fuhad, Saheed. I appreciate it. But looking at one of the riders that we have here, especially in the north, the fact that some northern CSOs are pulling out of the strike due to fear of it escalating or being hijacked, as we saw in 2020 during the #EndSARS protest. Do you think that their concerns and fears are founded?
When you have, for anybody who has done unionism, you would always have moles in the house, have fifth columnists in the house. And I think one of the strategies of government is always to break the rank and file of labor, the divide and rules tactics. Because again, it is within the right of any of the CSOs who are supposed to join this protest to back out at the last minute. We don't know what they know, and it would be wrong for me to judge or condemn their actions. So if they decide to back out, so be it. But again, whether anybody backs out or not is not the most important thing, Sandra. Or whether people will hijack it or not. The reality is that the government needs to pay attention to the suffering of the people and start to do things immediately to reduce those sufferings. Because again, the reality is that Nigerians have been pushed to the wall.
All right, but just a quick one. Looking at the fact that the NLC is saying that even before the protest even began, that there are some, there have been some positive reactions, let me put it that way, from the side of the government. The NLC believes that, the presidential broadcast that aired on Monday was, some sort of way to try to placate them in one way or the other. But there were no references at all to this situation. Let me put it that way.
Well, the president said the minimum wage review is on the offing, and that it was something the government was already talking about, and negotiations would continue with the Nigerian Labour Congress and organized labor. But there's a lot on the table for this government to deal with. The resident doctors are still on strike as we speak. Electricity union workers are still talking tough. The TUC is also negotiating. The aviation workers are not happy. I'm sure you remember the last episode with the Minister of Aviation. There's still a lot of problems in the aviation sector with the aviation workers. So the issue of minimum wage, I'm sure, would be a very difficult one at this time for the government to negotiate with labor. Because the reality is that labor has put in their own demand. They are talking about 200,000 naira minimum wage. And that's at the federal level. We don't know whether the state government will be able to do that. Because as we speak, even at 30,000 minimum wage, there are a lot of states who don't pay it. So the negotiations are going to continue, but for how long will the negotiations last? What are the timelines? And like I said, I think on Monday, Sandra, I said by now, one would expect that the government should have been able to put something on the table as what they are willing to pay as a reviewed minimum wage. You understand what I'm saying? That by now, if the labor is saying, we are demanding for 200,000 minimum wage.
So there should be
okay, this is what we are willing to pay. But I don't think there's anything on the table from the government for now. So, but again, time is of the essence, Sandra. We are losing time. The more time, I think the president also alluded to the fact that there's a time lag between removal of subsidy and the government's response to cushion the effect of subsidy removal. So they need to bridge that time. They need to quickly do something, really. Time is of the essence now, and the government must quickly come up with something. Practicable things. Because if you look at the plans of the government in the last speech by the president, I was discussing with one of my guys, and what we said was that all of those plans, Sandra, to fully implement them, even if implementation was done properly, Sandra, it will still take an average of 6 to 7 months to get those things done. So they need to quickly look at things, what you call quick wins, the low-hanging fruit, that the government can quickly roll out, to alleviate the sufferings of the people and the workers too.
All right. Thank you very much, Fuhad. As it is now, as scheduled, the nationwide protest will begin by 7:30 a.m. in Abuja and across states of the Federation. According to NLC Head of Information, Benson Upa, workers and CSOs will converge at the Unity Fountain, Abuja, to kickstart the protest, while the state chapters will commence protest at the same time. More details on page 6 and 28 of the Guardian newspaper. Moving on now, we also have here it's okay. Fuad, yesterday the screening continued, and a lot of people have had some complaints as regards the proceedings, at the National Assembly as regards this screening. That some people have, they said a lot of, they've used a lot of, adjectives to describe what is going on as regards, the
screening or just a joke.
Well, I have here on the front page of the Guardian, Senate shields El-Rufai from petition over insecurity, and that is on page 3 of the Guardian newspaper. All right, so what we have here is lawmakers yesterday blocked a petition against the nomination of former Kaduna State Governor Nasir El-Rufai when he appeared for screening. So he was on the third on the list to be screened, addressed the upper chamber on his political and educational profile and struggle for a democratic society. However, as soon as the floor was thrown open, Sunday Karimi from Kogi West drew the attention of his colleagues and the nominee to a petition which he said will be submitted in line with parliamentary rules. Karimi said, and I'm quoting, open quote, "Your performance in any office you served has been outstanding. Your record is there. In FCT as a minister, your record is there, and as a two-term governor of Kaduna State. I have a very strong petition against you that borders on security and unity of the nation. And I think that petition has to be considered alongside this screening." So after raising the envelope, that's open quote, end of quote, screening. After raising the envelope, he submitted to submitted it to the Deputy Senate President, Barao Jibrin, who was presiding. So, as it is now, Jibrin felt a little uneasy with the submission of the Kogi lawmaker, faulted the way the petition was submitted, and plenty going on and on. So, Fuad, shall we, or should we, should we expect anything?
Sandra, again, the entire screening process has become started as a joke, and it's probably going to end as a bigger joke. I'll say this: I watched the Rufai screening, as a brilliant, who has a brilliant rhetorical prowess. He was able to reel out his CV, what he has achieved in the private sector and in the public sector. And after all of that, a lot of the other senators who stood up against him were not even asking questions. They were just there shouting encomium on him, praising his CV and the things he had achieved in the past. But the same El Rufai himself, the nominee, was the one that now said that, look, Mr. Chairman of the screening committee was incidentally the Senate President, that look, there's a petition against me from a senator from Kogi State that he will be willing to respond to that petition on the floor, which I thought would have been a brilliant thing to see. He himself was the one that acknowledged the fact that there's a petition against him right there at the Senate floor. And then the next thing the Senate President said, no, this is not the place to respond to petition. All of those things will be handled differently, and that has been the pattern all through this screening period. We see situations where the Senate has decided that, look, the opponents that will come with governance does not subsist as far as Senate is concerned. A lot of these guys have questions to answer, maybe on their credentials, their issues with public service, and all of that. In fact, there was a particular woman that a senator asked her about her income declaration over a period of 3 years.
From Anambra.
And felt that maybe she was from Anambra State. And the senator was asking her whether she was under declaring her income. And then the next other senator shut him down. And they did not even allow the woman to answer the question to start with. The same thing happened there, Rufai. So we see a situation where the fear that we're going to have a rubber stamp National Assembly is already playing out. I think what Godswill Akpabio is simply doing, at this screening level, and a lot of the senators from the APC or even other parties, is to see a situation where we just act a script, to just fulfill all righteousness. Just come, show your face, say one or two things, and then we'll allow you to go. I've not really seen anybody being asked critical questions. Even the man with the 2 credits, he was not even allowed to fully explain. What they did was that, okay, maybe when you have other credentials, bring it. It would have been nice to see the guy defend the reason why he only presented a school cert with 2 credits. So with El Rufai, the same thing happened. He was not allowed to respond, to the issue of the petition that was raised against him as far as national security is concerned. Sandra, again, I tell our listeners, they can go online to dig up videos of how screening is done for ministerial nominees in other countries. Especially in the United States, who will say we practice and borrow their democracy. Go and see how they are graded at the committee level. It could take days. Days of screening until they are very sure.
Fuad, could you move a bit? I can barely get the words you're saying. Hello?
Better now.
No. No. Could just move a bit. I think it's the network.
Can you hear me now?
I would try to reconnect with you. Thank you. All right. So you're listening to Trends in the Papers on Mainland 98.3 FM. And what we're looking through now, we're looking through the Guardian newspaper, and we're having a conversation as regards one of the headlines on the front page of the Guardian, which states Senate shields El Rufai from petition over insecurity in Kaduna. And we're having a conversation as regards, how the screening process has been, generally speaking, so far. And this is not the first time, or this is not the first person that will be shielded from any sort of, query or petition during the screening. One would wonder what exactly is the point of the screening. But then, as it is now, Jibrin, the senator representing Kaduna North on the platform of the PDP, which happens to be an opposition, Khalid Ibrahim Mustafa, applauded El-Rufai for leadership qualities. He urged senators to allow the nominee to take a bow and go. And that this is from an opposition party now. So
No, that's the pattern, Sandra. They are all in bed. They are all. I think I don't know what has happened. Before the composition of the 10th National Assembly, I kept asking the question about the fate of opposition politics in Nigeria. Sandra, if you remember, I kept saying that, look, what will become of opposition politics in Nigeria? Because, Sandra, there's no democracy without a vibrant opposition. We can call for a vibrant National Assembly and independent National Assembly. But if you don't have a very vibrant opposition, then there's no democracy. And with what we have seen at this 10th National Assembly, everybody seems to be in bed together. If an opposition senator from Kaduna State is even in one shield, where you have thought that, the serious question should have come from about the performance of El-Rufai as governor for 8 years. There was no question raised about Southern Kaduna, the killings in Southern Kaduna, the agitations against him in Southern Kaduna. There were no questions raised about his hard stance on religious issues, some of the religious sentiments and hardline opinion that he has about Christians in the North. One would have thought that those were supposed to be the questions that would have been thrown at El-Rufai, so that we can understand his perception about religious tolerance in Nigeria. Nothing of that was done, and the only petition that came was also dropped.
all right.
He was even ready to answer, Sandra. He was ready to answer to that petition. But, the Senate had the other idea. And that has been the pattern. And that's why I'm sorry, Sandra, if not as a justice, we have to just watch the screening. It's a complete waste of time.
Thank you very much, Fuhad. And on the final note on that particular story, I have here the Senate President Godswill Akpabio had to intervene and said, I have to inform all of you that I have received similar petitions from people against other nominees. But this is not where we are to deal with petitions. Our job here is to screen. And of course, we can refer petitions to where petitions will be dealt with.
Sandra, the word screening, what is the definition of screening? If you can't work on petitions and ask questions around the petitions against nominees, then what are you screening?
Well,
or maybe our own understanding of screening is different from their own definition of screening. So, okay, screening is just come. You talk about your CV, and that's why I said that if their own definition of screening is what we are seeing, then there's no need to screen at all. Since they have their CVs too, they could just read through their CV and then write the president that they have all been confirmed. So the idea of to come and talk is completely unnecessary.
okay. Well, he said, and I'm continuing now, he still said they are nominees of Mr. President. If it is something where there is a formal petition before the Senate, we'll look at it formally. But there are certain petitions we have to refer to the presidency or security agencies to look at, and that has nothing to do with us. By the time we go into confirmation, we will be so advised. So I want my brother to take a bow and go, and don't bother to explain the petition. That was from the Senate President as regards the petition against El-Rufai. Yes, I'm with you.
Sandra, do you know why it is important for nominees to talk about petitions against them, even if you are going to refer those petitions to the appropriate quarters? Whatever the nominee says about that petition also becomes an evidence against them, whether against or for them. You don't understand what I'm saying? Yes, it is right to refer them to the appropriate authorities, and that's why we also question the procedure for nominating ministers in Nigeria. If petitions don't arrive on time, for agencies to have considered it before the person appears before the Senate. But again, it is important that at the level of screening at the House, those nominees talk about those petitions so that whatever they say, also becomes an evidence for against them going forward. And then we also understand whether the person is qualified or not. Okay, so what exactly is the screening about?
All right. Well, let's move on from that story now. More details of that on page 3 of the Guardian newspaper. I also have here danger averted as light aircraft on test run crashes on Lagos Road. This happened yesterday, somewhere around Oba.
It's a big one, yes. Yeah.
Yes, but fortunately, thankfully, no life was lost, and the governor was there to, assess the situation. And we also had, very, very prompt first responders on the scene of what happened. Well, more details of that on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. I also have here Consider FCT 37th Nigerian state for presidential poll. Tinubu begs court, and that is on page 3 of the Guardian newspaper. So they're closing the arguments at the PEPC, that's Presidential Election Petition Court. All right. The president prayed the PEPC sitting in Abuja to consider the Federal Capital Territory as 37th state of the Federation. Adopting his final written address, Tinubu, through his lead counsel, Chief Wole Olanipekun, submitted that FCT is the 37th state. Well, there's some considerations here. However, you can read the details on page 3.
Let's just quickly give this an update on what has happened at the EEPC. We now have all parties have all given their closing statement.
Yes.
All parties. And just that yesterday, the petition court, the election petition tribunal, also reserved judgment. So what it means is that when they reconvene now, a judgment will be delivered on all the petitions. You know, we are talking about unified petitions now. So I think the election petition tribunal, the presidential election petition tribunal, is working to time because again, you know, judgments were supposed to come finally latest by September 18th. But it is now that all the parties have closed their statements, the election petition tribunal has reversed judgment. I think that sometime in August, we should be able to get the election petition tribunal to reverse judgment on all of the petitions. So it will be a big one to see what the courts will say from the petitions from Peter Obi, Labour Party, PTP. Everybody has closed their case. You know, they've given their final statement yesterday. And it was interesting. It's not our job to begin to analyze what was said or what was not said. So we just have to wait to court deliver its judgment. But latest, I'm sure sometime in August the judgment should come. But latest in September, the judgment will come.
Thank you very much, Saheed Fuhad. More details on page 3 of the Guardian newspaper. We also have here on the front page, Falana warns ECOWAS leaders against attacking Niger Republic. And that is on page 7 of The Guardian, where human rights lawyer Femi Falana, SAN, has urged the authority of heads of state and government of ECOWAS to impose more stringent actions on Niger Republic, adopt measures to make them work, particularly given the intransigence of the coup plotters. And he gave a warning that the use of force should be ruled out. Do you agree, Fuhad?
Well, as far as I know, Femi Falana is a lawyer. I don't know his complete understanding of international politics and diplomacy. That's number one. Number two, I don't know his understanding of military warfare and all of that. So, again, it's extremely difficult if you are not on ground to observe these things, to just make statements like that. But I know that, again, you know, military incursion into Niger would be extremely difficult because, you know, you have a situation where these military guys, despite all of the threats issued by ECOWAS, are still going ahead to form a government. As we speak, General Chiani, or what's his name, has now appointed governors to about 8 states, 8 provinces of Niger. You know, so what it means is that he's still going on to form the government. He's not even listening to what ECOWAS is saying. And like we said, Sandra, you know, whether anybody likes it or not, if ECOWAS decides to invade Niger, to reinstall President Bazoum, all of that will be done solely, or about 90% of that cost, military needs and all of that will be there. You know, the cost would have to come on Nigeria in terms of military, you know, facilities, in terms of soldiers, because Nigeria is the big brother, is the biggest in the house when it comes to ECOWAS. But you know, just yesterday, statements have been coming from Mali. Military junta in Mali is warning that, you know, with his very funny-looking camouflage, he's also talking tough. The military guys also in Guinea are also talking tough. And in the mix of because it's a very dangerous cocktail, Sandra, a dangerous cocktail that we're dealing with in the West African sub-region. You have the Western powers, United States of America, France, also, you know, saying that, look, President Bazoum should be reinstated as president. But in all of that, there's a silent one that we're not talking about, and that is the Wagner mercenaries who are pushing the agenda of Russia in Africa. We are hearing that they are already working with the military junta. So it's a very dangerous cocktail that should be handled carefully. Sandra, if you understand what I'm saying. It's a very dangerous one because I know there are people backing these military guys, these coupies. So in all of that, there's a 7 days ultimatum given by ECOWAS for these military guys to relinquish power and restore Bazoum. I think by Monday, that 7-day ultimatum will last. Then we'll now see what Nigeria intends to do. I understand that there are heavy sanctions already on Niger. All the borders have been closed. International aids have been suspended. But these military guys don't look at any people who want to back down. They are forming the government. They are already appointing governors. They are already making decisions. President Bazoum is still under house arrest. So it will be nice to see, interesting to see how Nigeria is able to handle this. Because again, I think Nigeria is the major stakeholder here when it comes to ECOWAS.
Thank you very much. More details on page 7 of the Guardian newspaper. And that's all we can take from the Guardian. You're listening to Trends in the Papers on mainland 98.3 FM. We're looking through major trending stories on the front pages of our dailies. My name is Mobola Sandra, and I have Fuhad Saheed via the phone line. We're live on Facebook and YouTube, so you can watch the program live, and you can as well drop your comments as the conversation goes on. Now, the major headline on the front page of the Punch: subsidy talks. Labour shuns federal government, begins protest as oil workers down tools. And we have riders that says how federal government NLC meeting deadlocked. Labour, PDP berate Tinubu's proposed pay rise. IG orders AIGs and CPs to maintain order, prevent violence. Falana says protest is lawful. So the story is on page 2. We've been able to cover the major part of that particular story. But then just to add as an add-on, in a sign of things to come, oil workers on Tuesday shut down the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission's office as they sang and chanted solidarity anthems. So one of the protesters, Olu Ezekiel, said the protest had the backing of the Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria. Yeah, Pengasan. Yes, National President Osifo, who also doubles as TUC president. Festus Osifo. That's Festus Osifo, who also doubles as TUC president. So according to Ezekiel, NUPRC offices nationwide have been shut down as strike action will continue until their demands were met by the management. And according to what they're saying, they said that the management is ignoring the welfare of their staff. All right. And he said, and I'm quoting, as you are aware, we used to be DPR. And from the advent of PIA, which split DPR into two. That's downstream, upstream. We are the upstream section of the sector. We monitor the IOCs and independent oil producers. The PIA, that's Petroleum Industry Act, clearly states that we would not enjoy any employment conditions lower than what we used to enjoy as defunct DPR. But as we speak today, what we enjoy is less than what we used to have, and that is against the PIA. We should be at par with our counterparts in the oil and gas companies. So, of course, if I'm the regulator monitoring these people, I should be able to get a better condition of service than what they have. But right now, we are less paid. Workers go for jobs and return without getting paid. They keep bringing up policies and conditions of services that are completely inhumane and out of place. And we are saying no to this. He also complained of lack of working tools, offices, non-payment of salaries and other benefits. So that's the grievance of oil workers, and that's why they are on strike. So they are joining.
Upstream guys.
Yes, the upstream
guys.
guys.
Like the upstream.
Yes, that's NUPRC as against NMDPR. That's the downstream and midstream.
But his demand for me when he talked about the fact that as a regulator they should be at par with the people they are regulating. I don't know how that works. Because if he's talking about being the regulators of the IOCs, for example, he's talking about the oil companies who are drilling oil and all of that, the Shells of this world, the Chevrons of this world. So if as a regulator you are expecting to be paid the same way Shell and Chevron workers are being paid, for example, I don't know where that is coming from. But whatever it is, a lot of workers in Nigeria have different demands on the table for the government to consider. And that's why the government must move very, very fast. The doctors have their own demands. aviation guys have their own demand. This is just an agency within the oil sector also making demand. So the government needs to move fast. They need to act very, very fast. And these are all public sector guys. Who just imagine the demands of the private sector. Who is going even to attend to that? Nobody is ready to even attend to that as we speak. Or don't you think we have our own demands too as private sector guys?
We have.
But is anybody talking about that?
But we'll soon
protest.
We can't protest, but we'll have a chance. We'll have a chance to speak because we dialogue.
No, the president acknowledged the fact that look, a lot of private sector guys are struggling to survive. Some of them on their own have been raising salaries of staff, and the only thank, the private employers. The only thing he said was to just thank them for understanding with government. But I'm sure a lot of them also have a lot of demand from the government. The biggest demand is create an enabling environment for businesses to thrive. That's the biggest demand, and they should attend to that.
All right.
From private sector.
Well, more details of that on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. Very quickly, above the masthead of the Punch newspaper, we also have here Tinubu sends second ministerial list today. So, the president will today send a new batch of ministerial nominees to the Senate for screening. And this is according to a reliable source in the Senate. So
let's just have it said completely so that we can move on. I'm sure they can do all. There's no need to waste any more time. Just send the remaining. We're expecting to have 42 ministers unless anything changes. So if we have 28, then we are expecting like another 14. So let's just have the 14. Let the Senate complete whatever they are doing, and then we can have the government formed properly, and so that ministers can begin to attend to critical issues of national interest.
all right.
For me, I don't see anything. I'm not excited about any other list. Let's just have them, and then we move on.
More details on page 29. Now, still on the front page of the Punch newspaper, I have here tax force officials extort 35,000 naira from motorists on Lagos Ibadan Expressway, and that is on page 4. And there's a receipt too.
They should be investigated and they should be dealt with appropriately. Yeah.
There's receipt of the transaction, whether it was.
Is it POS or you went to bank or?
There is a receipt, as in there's a receipt here
From
for local government.
Well, okay, these local government guys,
Yeah. There's a
It's
receipt.
a big problem.
Yeah, there's a receipt of payment of the 35,000 naira. And
for what? Is it a fine?
Well, it's not written there. It just wrote 35,000 naira paid, and that's all.
These local government guys have become a big problem.
That's what
You have them carrying stick, wearing a form of funny uniform, harassing bike riders. If they get tax force, what are they tax forces? They're just there to harass and exploit the people. And it has to stop. That's what governance is about. It has to stop. You have all of these local governments sending boys out there to harass people, harass tricycle riders, Okada riders, bus drivers, asking for all manner of funny documents. In the drive for local governments to also make money, they just send boys out there to harass people.
Well, more details of that on page 4 of the Punch newspaper. Thank you for staying tuned. Let's move on now to the Nation newspaper. And the major headline there says, IG warns against violence as Labour insists on protest. NLC seeks security cover for protesters. And now, if I may understand correctly, Fuhad, normally if there's a protest that's going to, be carried out, is it normal that security agencies provide security?
Yes.
During the protest?
The police are supposed to provide security, provide protection for them. I think what the IG is simply saying is that, they would not tolerate the idea of anybody hijacking the protest yet.
All
So they'll be there to provide protection for the labor unions and the protesters.
All right. He has ordered AIGs, that's assistant inspectors general of police. He has also ordered police commissioners to beef up security for the protest. Now, more details of that on page 4 of the Nation newspaper. We also have here how Tinubu will end electricity crisis. That's coming from El Rufai. And Disco's ownership for review. Economy on recovery curve, says Edu. You know, I think we should look at this is the fact that there are no portfolios attached, but you see some of these
People are already
yeah, you know,
speculating.
they're already, some of these nominees are already giving, you know, advices, suggestions, or, you know, plans that they have that they want to, what if they are not placed where they think they'll be
That's the problem. That's the problem. That's actually the problem because El Rufai appeared, the screening yesterday at the screening, and most of the questions asked him were around the power sector, the power sector. And so there are already speculations out there that it could be the next minister of power. You know, and there were a lot of questions were asked. They asked him about.
You see, sorry, Wale Edu also giving some economic policy advice.
But if you talk about Wale Edu, he was not the only one that talked about the economy. Adebayo Adelabu was also there, who also talked about the economy and finance of the country. So it would have just been nice for portfolios to have been attached with his name. And that's why you can see that a lot of the questions, apart from Wale Edu, El Rufai, maybe Adebayo, most of the questions were just general questions and the assumption that, look, any of these guys function in any ministry. As a country, I think we should just learn to do things the right way. But again, El Rufai said a whole lot of things about the power sector, some of the reforms he felt should be done in the power sector. But I have my experience with El Rufai. He's very elitist in his thinking. He's a bourgeoisie when it comes to ideas and concepts. And it's also very capitalist in orientation. I just hope that we're not going to have a situation where the people will have to continue to pay more while he protects the industry players. I have my fears really about him. He has a record of being an elitist, a bourgeoisie when it comes to policies and ideas. That's just my fear if he becomes minister of power.
All right. Well, moving on from that, the story is on page 2 of the Nation newspaper. We also have here, Emefiele gets court nod to serve bail order on DSS. That story is on page 3, and it says the Federal High Court in Lagos has granted the suspended CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele leave to serve the DG of DSS the court order admitting him to bail and directing his remand in the custody of the Nigerian Correctional Service. So Justice Nicholas Owebo granted the order yesterday following an ex parte application moved by Emefiele's counsel. So basically, DSS should allow Emefiele go and.
It's obvious that the DSS is not prepared to properly prosecute Emefiele. It's just very clear. It's clear as daylight. I would think all they need to do is to allow the bail granted this man to subsist. Let him again go to the correctional service. I'm sure he'll be able to perfect his bail conditions. And then maybe, I'm sure his passport is going to be with the DSS. If they are now able to dig up, more evidences, they could maybe rearrest him and charge him for further offenses. And if they are not able to dig up anything against him, so be it. We have Mr. Obazi, who has been, as a special investigator, who has been appointed by the president. And so, who knows, he might just be able to dig up some things.
So maybe they should just wait for the investigation.
Because again, it's obvious the DSS has nothing against this man.
They didn't do an investigation before arresting him. So they arrested him based on what grounds?
Sandra, how you ask you? Is that supposed to be a rhetorical question? If you heard the man, you remember that even before he was, Sandra, before he was arrested, even during the Buhari era, the DSS had issued a statement saying that they were looking for him for terrorism financing last year. And so if you eventually Buhari left, Tinubu came in, and you arrested him and kept him for over a month, and then all you could present before the court is that he possesses illegal firearms, a shotgun and cartridge. Google and charge. It doesn't make any sense. So if they are completely unprepared to prosecute this man, they should allow him just enjoy his bail as granted by the court. And if they are able to dig up more evidence against him or things against him, he could be arrested and represented before the court.
All right.
Or further charges can be added to whatever
they came up with.
Yeah.
More
can amend their charges.
More details on page 3 of the Nation newspaper. I also have here, immigration arrests Cameroonians seeking Nigerian passport. I'm curious. So what?
That one is a normal thing now.
Why?
Across the West African borders, Even in Cotonou, you have people who are Beninois who pretend that they are from Badagry or the neighboring towns. You know now, Ogun State people, you don't have to cross from that side.
So I'm a crosser.
We also have Nigerians who also try to get. Well, it's illegal. I'm not saying it's legal. I'm just saying that look, it's a common practice.
All right. Well, the Nigerian Immigration Service has arrested scores of Cameroonians for allegedly attempting to obtain Nigerian international passport for dubious purposes. And said the arrest followed diligent investigation by personnel of the service in various commands. And they have warned that there are outsiders who now obtain the Nigerian passport to commit crimes outside the country to soil Nigeria's image. The story is on page 3 of the Nation newspaper. All right, that's it from the Nation. We also have here, residents defy 2-week sit-at-home call in Southeast. The Southeast is waking up. This is, actually an interesting one. There seems to be some sort of fight back, in the Southeast as regards, the compulsory sit-at-home in recent times. Well, as it is now, more details of this particular defiance on page 4 of the Nation newspaper. And Oyo Labour Unions lock secretariat for second day. That is on page 26. No,
I think the labor guys, you have a serious issue with the Saheed.
That one is different from the national one.
I said there are too many issues. They are talking about deductions from their salaries. They are talking a whole lot of things about their welfare, And I think Saheed, and that's what people say, that look, when he was seeking for their vote, second term vote, he was not doing all of things. Now has gotten second term and is now bringing up a lot of anti-worker, policies. I think you have to sustain the confidence of the people.
According to pictures of placards from the protest or standoff, some of the placards read, pay 2018-2019 salary arrears now in Oyo State tertiary institutions, non-implementation of 2,500 new appointments to non-teaching staff. Let the poor
breathe.
Let the poor breathe. Well, that's all from the Nation newspaper. We have just a few minutes left. You are still on to trends in the papers on Mainland 98.3 FM. It's a paper review show. We're looking through the major trending stories on the front pages of our dailies. And now finally we are on to Nigerian Tribune. And the major headline there, IGP talks tough as NLC and TUC gear up for protest. And the writer says, again, government moves to avert protest. Labour says no going back. Protest commences 7:30 a.m. today nationwide. Lagos protesters won't join, and that's coming from MC Oluomo or Musiliu Akinsoya, the chairman.
Lagos, for his own people.
Sorry, transporters. Apologies for that.
Lagos transporters.
Yes, said transporters.
Which Lagos transporters?
Well, he's the chairman of the Parks and Garages Management. So,
so he decides for the transporters, the bus owners. Is he their father?
Is the regulator.
Does he give them food? Does he regulate what? Does he give them free fuel? So he pays the school fees of their children.
Maybe
to determine whether they will protest or not. In what capacity is he talking, sir?
Chairman of Lagos State Parks and Garages Committee.
And he should talk about his parks now, that his parks will be open and garages will be open. And if the people who use the parks and garages say they are going to protest, so be it. He doesn't have a right over there.
Well, he announced Fuhad, he announced a relief package for them to cushion the pain of the fuel subsidy removal. Yes, he did. He said that after consideration, the normal fee that they used to pay, instead of 800, it would be 600 naira. That the people should also reduce, transport fare for people.
Okay, maybe that was the governor was saying, that the yellow buses were also reduced. Okay, so instead of 800,
so it'd be paying 600. So yeah.
Sandra, an average bus driver in Lagos pays upwards of 7,000 naira a day.
8,600. 8,600
a day to this Agbero. The 800 naira one is the general one that the Lagos thing was talking about before, if you remember.
And it's just
the consolidated one.
It's just one of the many things that they have to pay.
Many things that these Agberos collect. There are bus stops. Apart from the ones you pay in the garage, when you load, at every time you load, you pay. So these people should not. You see, that's the problem when governance is shrouded in secrecy and deceit.
All right.
Because if you read through the story now, you think that buses in Lagos, the only thing they pay is 800 naira. Standard. Even tricycle pay more than 800 naira a day.
All right.
In Lagos.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time now because I wish we could go further as regards this conversation. I was waiting for, somewhere for it to be reported. I said all transport families and members will be at work because Lagos State government has announced interventions in transport sector. So it doesn't affect the transport in Lagos. Well,
what's intervention?
800 to 600. That's the intervention.
For...
So that's all we can. That's all we can.
If there's no Fuhad,
we've run out of time.
People are tired.
We've run out of time, unfortunately.
Right.
But that's all. That's all for this morning on trends in the papers. However, don't go anywhere. We're still here. We'll converge by 8:40 for Mainland Focus, where we'll focus on two major trending stories from the papers this morning, and then you get to share your thoughts as a listener, from wherever it is that you are listening from. All right, this is still Mainland 98.3 FM, the sound of Lagos. Please stay tuned.